I'm Scott L. Miller. It's the 11th of March, 2023, and this is my vlog of life in Nicaragua. Today is Saturday, and I started the day in Managua and traveled back to Leon after having gone out partying on a Friday night in Managua, as I like to do. And that is what brings me to today's topic. Last night, I gave the update as to what we actually did yesterday, and today I'll give a little bit of the update of exactly what we did at the end. But I want to talk about something that really occurred to me, and I've mentioned it previously on the show, but I don't think I've ever really delved into just how dramatic this is. And one of the biggest cultural differences between North Americans, that's primarily Americans and Canadians, and Latin Americans in general, Central Americans specifically, and Nicaraguans to an extreme degree, even compared to other regions of Central America, is what I call going out culture, or vice versa in North America, staying in culture. Coming from North America, growing up first in New York, but living throughout the country, one of the things that really struck me is how much people stay in. The idea of life in North America is, and we talk about it as a consumer culture, and that is certainly true, and this plays into it. We spend a lot of time spending time and money working really long hours, generally with the idea that we're going to accumulate a lot of goods, and we are going to store those goods in our homes, and we're going to work really hard to have really large, comfortable homes full of nice TVs, big stereos, lots of amenities, cool gadgets, fun games, things like that. And we have this large investment in our homes, and that means that it makes sense for us to want to stay home because we've put all that time and effort into making home where we want to be, and that's reasonable. Right? Once you've spent an outrageous amount of money buying a house, and then you have worked really hard decorating it, and you've spent years of your life working to buy all the things you put into that house, well, you want to enjoy them. Certainly. You want to enjoy sitting on that big, comfy couch. You want to roll around on that big, fluffy wall-to-wall carpet. You want to watch that giant big screen TV and listen to that giant stereo that you got, and you're paying for all these streaming services. You want to watch those movies you're paying for, and so forth. It goes on and on. Of course, the reason you did all those things is because you want to use them, not because you want to collect things you're not using, obviously. And so American culture leans heavily towards this concept of not going out. You very rarely leave home, and there's good reasons for this. One is that we have this culture of putting all these things in our homes and having big homes, and that's where we put our investment. So that's one side. Another side is that going out in the United States is typically extremely expensive and difficult. If you don't want to drive, in order to be able to drink, for example, you need to use an Uber or worse, a taxi. Public transportation generally doesn't exist. There's exceptions, New York City, for example, but generally you're going to have to do something quite expensive. Just taking an Uber, which is far cheaper and more reliable and far safer than a taxi in Dallas, Texas, where I lived for a long time. If we were to go out to a restaurant via an Uber, we would easily spend the same amount of money, probably not more, but about the same amount of money as a normal entire night out in Nicaragua, right? That's a big deal. That means you're spending a night out just to get to a place to decide if you want to have the night out. And the cost of the Uber is pretty minor in comparison to the cost of the night, right? Each drink, every bite of food, any activity, all has a cost associated with it, and it gets higher and higher. So going out in America, generally, whether it's just going to dinner or if it's going to a club, going to a concert, going to an event, typically costs a significant amount of money, and that makes people pull back and not just go out casually. What are we doing tonight? I don't know. There's nothing on TV. Should we go to a club and go spend, hours and hours out and go drinking and get dinner and do something fancy, get dressed up? Ooh, I didn't budget for that, right? You know that term, right? I didn't budget for that. Is that in our budget? Those are things you say about going to dinner. Like, obviously, everybody says that about something, but you say that about going out to dinner. How many times can we go out in a week? Ooh, we only budget going out once or twice a week. We got to be careful. If we go to McDonald's, we can do it twice. We go into, some fancy place. Well, only once. It's a special thing. Those things are very, they make it a decision to stay in or go out based on a lot of factors. This huge effort to get out, and that's another thing, is that because of the lack of public transportation, because of the way that cities and communities are built in the United States, going out is difficult, staying in is easy, right? And so everything comes together. Plus, there's just a general culture of being far, far, far less social, and you can take any amount of time you want to hypothesize why this is. My personal belief, and I've said this many times, is that America is built on a colonial history of avoiding other people, right? Other parts of colonial Americas, like Central America, had colonists who came from other places, but they came for financial conquest, first of all. They did not come to escape where they were in most cases. So that meant that the Europeans who were joining the societies here weren't bringing very often an escapist mentality. They were bringing a financial investment, an adventurous mentality. And the people who lived here in the Americas were not wiped out in a genocide for the most part, and their culture remains. And so it just naturally, two cultures that like to go out, combining in a place with no reason not to go out, kept that tradition of going out and being outside your home. America was primarily colonized later and was avoided previously because it didn't have the financial resources that other regions, Central America, Northern South America, the Caribbean, had. It was much more costly to colonize, it was much more dangerous to colonize, and it just didn't have the payoffs. Why did the early colonists go there? Primarily, and especially the Pilgrims, came because they disliked the social nature, they disliked the freedoms. This is literally what they wrote. They hated the religious freedom of the Netherlands, because that's where they actually came from. They were British, but they had already moved to the Netherlands. Both places had too much religious freedom. They didn't like that. And so they wanted a place where they could have fewer religious freedoms. That is why so many of the things like the freedom of religion, as is written in the U.S. Constitution, is not a freedom for you to practice religion. It is a freedom from the government interfering in your religion. It was literally the right of states to determine religious constraints, right? It's what made the U.S. a religious society by law, even though it sounds the opposite. That is how it's, go read the Constitution. That was its purpose, was to keep the federal government from enforcing freedom of religion. That's, right? Weird, but that was the thing, that they left Europe because Europe already had freedom of religion, and that meant they weren't able to create a society full of constraints that discouraged these social activities, that discouraged exploring other religions, or that encouraged exploring religions. And so they wanted a place where they could lock that down, where they had more freedom for the religious to be in charge and make government decisions. And so those things, I believe, led to America being a land of people who were antisocial. And remember, this was people, there was that group, and then there was the tons and tons of people who just moved because they wanted open space. They didn't want to be around other people. They moved because they wanted to populate the West and live on a ranch and have no neighbors and never have to talk to anyone. There was a lot of that, right? And America, I think, still reflects that today. As you go from east to west, the amount that people kept filtering by generation. Wow, there's all these people in the place that's still really empty. We're going to keep moving farther away, so our children don't want to be near the parents, and again and again. And so you filter, and the West Coast is now many generations of filtering of people who didn't want to be around other people, whereas the East Coast was primarily the first generation who didn't want to be around other people, and then their children were like, that's weird, and they stayed. So I think those facts kind of put together an America that is built on a DNA of, we're homebodies for the most part, right? And that's a long explanation, but I think it's important to understand that there's really strong currents under the surface that make North Americans, and this is important for both sides to understand, to really get an understanding of each other. Americans really are built on hundreds of years of what do you do at the end of the workday? You go to your home, and if you do something, it is to improve your home or to enjoy your home or to relax in your home. And Nicaraguans and Central Americans and most Latin Americans are, your home is just a place that you sleep and store your necessary goods. You really don't invest in it. You don't think of it that way. And it's kind of a launching pad for going out. And you spend your time in the social space, not in the private space. And because of that, we have this really strong divergence in how the two cultures look at everyday life. Because of these differences, it's important when you're looking at anything we do in Nicaragua, when you're thinking about living in Nicaragua, if you're just interested in the culture, if you're coming from North America, it's really important to stop and say, oh, everything they do is really focused around going out. And the idea of having a Netflix account, for example, doesn't make the same kind of sense as it does in the United States. Now, of course, lots of people have Netflix here. I'm certainly not saying that they don't. But in the United States, we basically assume, well, you're going to have Netflix and a bunch of other streaming services, just as an example. You may have cable, you may do a bunch of different things because you're going to stay home. And what do you do at home? Well, you might play board games, you may play video games, and you're probably going to watch TV. Those are the big things. Of course, you may have hobbies and do different activities. You may cook and all kinds of stuff, but chances are you're going to do some of those kind of mainstream home entertainment things. Everybody does. It's just what we assume that people do. If you didn't do them, it would actually feel a little bit awkward. Like, wait, did you watch your television today? Oh, I didn't. I should really sit down and do that. You almost feel like you're missing something that you're supposed to do. I don't think anyone would really stop and say you're supposed to watch TV, but the feeling that that's something you're supposed to do kind of has an undercurrent. In Nicaragua, when you say, what are you doing this evening? There isn't this like expectation of the answer being, it's the reboot of MacGyver is on, right? That's what I'm watching. No, it's where you're really asking, where are you going? Where are you going to eat? Where are you going to listen to music? Where are you going to dance? Where are you going for karaoke, right? What time are you headed out? Where will I meet you? You basically assume that almost everyone is either unable to go out because they don't have enough money, or they are going out because that is the activity you do. And if you don't have enough money to go out, you certainly don't have enough money for a television, for example. And so you're not going home to watch television. So it's an amazing difference. This just completely innate or integral feeling of, in one culture, going out is the special. It's the exception. Right? Well, we're at home 5 days a week, but come Friday night, we all know it, right? Friday night, that's when we go out in America. And, you know, if you said, well, I'm staying in on a Friday night, that's fine. People go, oh, you know what? I love the Friday nights when I stay in, right? Because, yeah, going out on Friday night is kind of a special thing, but going out once, maybe twice a week is exhausting enough for most Americans that when you say, I'm taking a Friday night, I'm gonna go binge some television and order in a pizza, and I think we're going to do nothing. And everyone goes, oh yeah, that's a nice Friday, right? We all feel that way. And here, it's so completely the opposite. If you said, oh, I'm just going to stay home and binge some TV, people will be like, are you feeling okay? Maybe you coming down to something? You're feeling a little bit worn out? What's wrong? The idea that you would want to do that, and the idea that you're taking that one night a week to go out rather than that one night a week to stay home. You know what? It's Monday night, a lot of things are closed, and I need to catch up on some stuff around the house. I got some things to fix. I've got some, a little bit of paperwork to do. I just want to get that done. I'm going to stay in this Monday. You're going to stay in. Yeah, sometimes you got to do that, right? That's the gap, the difference, the every night is just, you just go out. It's just what you do. And so because of that, when you're walking around like Leon especially, because it's such a go out place and not that big, you're going to see so many people every single time you're out. It's not like, oh, I went out, a month ago I was out and I ran into my buddy while he was out. Oh, wow, you ran into someone you knew out and about? That's a coincidence, right? We would say that in America, but here it would be like, how many people that you know did you cross paths with tonight? Because any bar you go to, you're going to know. So if you've lived here for any amount of time, every bar you're going to know somebody. Every club you're going to know somebody. In many cases, right? I was in Managua last night. I know the bouncers. We run into people we know at every place we go to, right? And that's Managua. I don't live there. It's hours away. It is a big city. It's not a little place. When I'm in Leon, I run into people that I know on the way to a restaurant. If I'm walking to a restaurant, I will see people I know in the window of another restaurant on the way. I don't have to look for them. I don't have to be it doesn't have to be a place where we're crossing paths. It's so much. And so it's hard to really explain or to convey the degree to which, and it's hard to catch at first, the degree to which this completely changes so many aspects of life here that it's very difficult to tell because and I want to do an episode on this specifically, but when you're looking at my videos, for example, you may look at my videos, and if you look at Nicaragua from the aspect of homes, right? Let's show some homes and walk around and show how people really live. You will immediately say, oh, I mean, I can see how they survive, but I would want a bigger home. I would want a more comfortable home. I would want more amenities. I would want more furniture, whatever. Why isn't it full of stuff like that? And so if you look at it from that perspective, if you take the American perspective and look at it, you're going to say, oh, that's a very aesthetic culture, very, very limited, very Spartan. But if you look at it from a going out perspective, if you go to the clubs and say, oh, here's all these people and this is where they do. Every night they're out super late. They're able to drink a lot, eat a lot, go to nice restaurants, do all these things on very, what we consider very moderate incomes. You'd have the opposite. You'd have this, wow, that's so fancy. I mean, I could never realistically do that as an American. I guess if I gave up everything, I could pull it off, but it would be really tough. I'd be living paycheck to paycheck and struggling a lot to be able to potentially go out, and I'd have to really be careful, right? Like I couldn't order very much food. I'd have to really watch what I drank. Like that would be the mentality. And so if you're looking at Nicaragua from that side, it feels like a very rich culture, like financially. And if you're looking at it from the homes, it feels like a very poor culture financially because they're spending in a different place. And if you come to America from Nicaragua, you have the opposite feeling, right? It's like, oh, I guess you have these big houses. I don't understand why, but you can't afford to go to a diner. How is that possible, right? They get the culture shock in the opposite direction. Now, of course, the United States has the benefit of big media, so there's less culture shock coming that direction. But it's big. All that said, of course, if you, coming from North America or anywhere, come to Nicaragua or Latin America in general and don't have that desire to go out, one, I will say it's important to understand you will be missing a big piece of the Nicaraguan experience. That is part of the culture. It's what makes it the culture, and nothing says you have to come here and participate in every aspect of everything. Certainly not. You get to pick and choose, as they do. Right? They don't have to go out if they don't want to. Well, a lot of family pressure, I'm sure, but you know what I mean. But if you choose not to do that, if that's not a way that you choose to live, you're going to overlook and have a gap in your interactions with society, which is fine. But if you're coming and you want to internalize and really live the Nicaragua lifestyle, you kind of have to do that. And it's hard. Let me tell you, as an American, even doing a fraction of it, I try to skirt the line and go out a bit, but stay home a bit. Now, I have a lot of work to do, so that naturally puts me at home a bit more, and I can't really go out as much because I have to work. But I do try to go out quite a bit. We go out a lot in Leon, and I make this effort to go out in Managua on a regular basis. And we go out in Matagalpa once in a while. We go to San Juan del Sur once in a great while. Those things are interesting and fun and an important part of the culture and allow us to participate in a very important way. It's more than just, we're going out for a few drinks and maybe going dancing and having fun. Yes, that is true, but it is also how you meet people. It is how you become a member of many aspects of society. It's how you get connected. It's how you understand the Nicaraguan context in another way, right? We just had that video on the Nicaraguan context. This is another piece of that, right? That this is how they view the world, as a place to go out and interact with other people, not a place to build a home and be a recluse. But if you want to come here and live that American lifestyle, absolutely, you generally can. No one's going to make you go out. People will invite you a lot. People will be confused that you're not leaving. They'll think something's wrong. But the option does exist, and there's, I still think I would rather stay at home in Nicaragua than pretty much anywhere else. It's still cheaper to be at home. It's still much more comfortable. It's much more easy to hire staff to make it easier to stay home, easier to get the resources, have food delivered, whatever. Certainly, if you're going to do that, you probably want to lean towards being in a big city where going out doesn't affect you because you don't do it, and you have more services to come to you. But that may not be the case. But I would, if I wanted to be home all the time. And one of the things that triggered this was I saw at the restaurant we went to last night at Brutal, right next to that is the condos that are $3,000 a month starting U.S. prices in Managua, and the thought that everyone has is, why would you spend so much on a place that you don't go to, right? And the reason is because there are people who want to stay home, who want to not go out all the time, and they want their home to be amazing, but maybe in the middle of things. They want to just walk downstairs and have a couple really great restaurants without getting out of their parking lot. I get that, right? As an American, I totally feel that. Sorry, again, the camera completely overheated and crashed, and it did so in such a way, this is a GoPro problem, that it crashed and it couldn't shut itself off. So the heat protection goes away, and the just all the protections go away. It starts freaking out. It gives no indication because it keeps showing things on the screen, and I changed my glasses while I was in because it's getting darker out. And because of the way they make you mount the GoPro, this is one of my big GoPro complaints, because they do this weird screw mount thing, which I get, it's for really securely securing an action cam to a lot of things, but that mount, and especially the media kit, takes so long to get off that by the time you know that the camera has crashed in this way, you now have a camera that is burning up and you can't shut it off because the power button stops working. That's one of the first things that goes. That's how you find out that this problem exists, because it acts normally, and when you go to stop the video, it doesn't stop and it starts shaking, and you go to power it off and it can't power off, and then it starts burning up, and that's a real problem because now you're stuck and you can't get this burning hot camera off of the mount, because you have to take the screw out, and then you have to put the ears down, then you have to take the media kit off, and then you got to open the media kit, which is so hard to open. That's how mine broke, because that's so poorly done. And then you have to pull the camera out with a lot of force, which also is a problem. Then you have to yank the battery out, and the battery gets yanked out by a kind of delicate process that, if the battery overheats, often can be very problematic and can get stuck. So there's a lot of steps, each of which is a bit delicate and can it sounds like, oh, what? None of that's that big of a deal, until you actually have to do it under pressure. You realize a lot of those pieces don't work reliably, and you can actually spend a minute or two with a device that is at literally scalding temperatures that you can't turn off, and so it's going to burst the battery, and then the whole thing's going to be toast. So sorry for the interruption. That is what happened, and it drives me crazy. Both GoPros do it. That is not something they've gotten figured out between the GoPro generations yet. So I mean, I know that there's a lot going on in these cameras, and I love my GoPros, but I do wish they would get some of these things figured out, because their battery handling is a bit problematic. That powering off. And really, it's not an electronics thing, it's a mounting thing. If they figured out the media kit and mounting in a much better way, and there's really obvious better ways that they could do it without, someone just needs to make a better media kit for it, and it would fix a lot of those problems. We need access to the battery, access to the SD card, those types of things, while the media kit is mounted. We shouldn't have to lock it all up to get to that. Anyway, so I prefer, for the most part, the Nicaraguan lifestyle, the going out lifestyle, but not to the degree that Nicaraguans do. I temper it with, I really like it and I lean that way, but I like to stay home more than most Nicaraguans. And I think that's important. It's important for, and this is tough. I lost 10 minutes of recording, so I have to figure out where I was and what I said and what's just redundant. I think if you're looking at Nicaragua, if this is a place you're interested in, if you're coming down and you hear this and you say, ooh, well, that's not a lifestyle that I'm looking for, I've got a couple things to say. One is that the important thing is understanding that that is the context. It's not important that you go out necessarily. It's important that you understand that that is the expectation and that you may be doing something abnormal. That means that you may need to, if you are looking at a house, for example, consider that that house may be designed around not going out. And when you have questions, why is it designed this way? Or when you're looking at things, what do I need to look out for? Be aware. Maybe the house is not actually meant for you to have a TV in, for example. Maybe it's not, doesn't have space with the assumption that you're going to be storing anything because you're just not expected to be there. So that's one thing. Just be aware, right? Awareness is sometimes all that matters. The second thing is that, well, consider that if you want to really get into Nicaragua society, if you really want to adapt and stuff, maybe going out, and maybe not as much as Nicaraguans do, but going out far more than you're anticipating might be something you do want to do. Third, you may get here thinking you don't want to do it and discover that you actually really like it because it's so different than in America. That is a very real possibility. I certainly enjoy going out here far more than I ever did in the United States, simply because the experience is very different. And so that's important for me. I could probably have predicted that that was a possibility, but I didn't know that that would happen, and it did. And lastly, you simply don't have to. Once you know that that's the case, once you accept that you're okay with the not, you'll never be mistaken for a Nicaraguan if you don't do that, not that you're going to be anyway, then by all means, right, come to Nicaragua and stay home. It's a great place to stay home. You don't have to go out. It offers so many things that make staying home so wonderful. Don't feel that this is telling you, consider that you need to go out when you get, no. Just be aware that is the lifestyle here. Just like if someone moved from Nicaragua to America and was like, but I want to go out every day. I just wanted a tiny little apartment and I want to go out and party every day and go to restaurants and go to clubs and stay out super late. Well, it's going to be a struggle to stay out super late, but do the best that you can, and that's fine. You can certainly do that. It's going to be expensive, right? So you're going to need a pretty good job to pay for that, but it can be done. No one's going to stop you. It doesn't cause problems. But when people are like, did you really get the American experience, which is a lot of watching TV and having a big house, you're gonna be like, well, no, I kind of live the Nicaragua lifestyle in America, and you'll be living the American lifestyle in Nicaragua, which is absolutely fine. And there's enclaves where that's how people live, right? So that's not even a problem that way. So I hope that this is informative and gives you a better picture of what Nicaragua is like and what moving here would be like, and things that you need to consider when moving that may influence your decisions one way or another, or have some effect on where you want to look to live, what kind of housing you want to look at, or things you need to ask yourself when you're looking at places. Oh, this house is far away from activities. Maybe I really want to be involved in activities. Maybe I want to be closer to them. Or maybe a lot of people think they need a much bigger house than they do. And when they get here, they realize, I don't actually use my house that much. They thought they needed to, because in America, you need to, right? You need to be home all the time. So you need a house that's going to accommodate that. But in Nicaragua, you don't, right? If you want to go out and you want to do the Nicaragua thing, then maybe you don't want that much house. You want a smaller house that's easier to secure, easier to clean, easier to maintain, because it doesn't make any difference. Certainly for us coming here, we thought we needed a lot more space. And once we're here, I do work from home. I use more space than most people, but I don't need anywhere near as much space as we used to have, because we don't spend the time in the house in the same way. Thanks for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe if you'd like to support the channel. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller, and I'll put the link on the screen and down below in the description. As always, just go to that page. You can send me a coffee right there, and that comes directly to me and helps support the channel, helps make all of this possible, helps me get new GoPros and batteries and all those things that I need when things don't work. And please remember to tell your friends about the show, share on social media, and of course, if you have any comments, questions, ideas, things you want to know about your experience with going out in Nicaragua, your adjustment to staying in, going out culture, living in a different place, get down there in the comments. Let's talk about it. I love all the conversation that we have here. We have such a great, lively, vibrant community of friendly people. It's really wonderful getting to connect with all of you. And as always, thanks for joining me, and I will see all of you tomorrow.